Good evening. This is ThinkTech Global. I'm David Day, and it has taken nearly 13 years to this day, September 11th, for the reality of global Islamic terrorism to finally sink in, both here in the U.S. and everywhere else, including the ever-equivocal capitals of the Middle East. In the 10 years after 9/11, we saw London, Madrid, the Boston Marathon, multiple failed attempts to bomb New York City, Mumbai, Kenya, Boko Haram, the re-rocketing of Tel Aviv, Christian holy places destroyed, thousands of Arabs blown up in the act of daily life, and that's just the short list. ISIS is just the tip of the world's unstable iceberg. We're all living on the Titanic. And now, last night, we saw a reluctant president going to war without really admitting it is a war, and at the same time, we have to focus on our own border security here at home. And to help us with this discussion, we have the former special agent in charge of the FBI here in Hawaii and the Pacific, Mr. Charles Goodwin. And Charlie, nice to have you back.
Good to be back with you, David. Thank you.
And we appreciate your contribution in many, many programs here with us at ThinkTech. And we also have a aviation security expert, Mr. Charles Kaler and Eric Kaler. See, okay. All confused here. Eric, nice to have you back again.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
Ladies and gentlemen, Eric is a nationally known aviation security expert. And the last time we had you here, we were talking about the first of the lost Malaysian airliners, and
correct.
And we never found it.
We've never found it. The discussion is very much in the same place it was when we left it off.
Okay. Well,
I'm guessing that Malaysian airliner is probably in the same place now too.
It probably hasn't moved.
Probably hasn't moved since.
We haven't found it. Well, here on the 13th anniversary of 9/11, what we want to do is talk about ISIS and U.S. border security. And these two gentlemen are uniquely qualified to help us with that discussion here on ThinkTech. And so, Charlie, let me start with you. How about give us kind of your perspective? Let's start with the geographic borders of the United States. Where are we on in terms of port security, as an example? Ships coming in.
Well, let me first of all just speak real briefly about my background in that. Back in the day, back in the 90s, I was assigned at FBI headquarters in our violent crimes section in what we called boats, trains, and planes, which was interstate theft unit. Okay. And that focused on a lot of the problems and the issues that we're looking at today in terms of border security, believe it or not. And so, for instance, on the port situation, as the years have gone by, one of the big concerns has always been terrorist organizations using the ports to bring, for instance, explosives, dirty bombs, and that sort of thing in containers from overseas.
In addition to personnel?
Yeah, in addition to personnel and that sort of thing. And of course, in a lot of places, our borders in ports are fairly porous, and it would not be a stretch to think that personnel could also get in through the ports. And we're not talking about off cruise ships. We're talking off shipping container ships that come from other countries and that sort of thing. But one of the biggest concerns has been the ability or the perceived ability for a terrorist organization to bring, for instance, a dirty bomb or a very large explosive device into the country in a container on a ship into a port.
Okay.
And so a lot of the ports have taken fairly extensive measures to utilize X-ray equipment to look at containers and screen containers coming into the country.
Okay, so short answer to the question, your assessment of the port security in the United States?
Probably generally pretty good. The major ports in the U.S. pretty well covered by Customs and Border Patrol, other intelligence agencies looking at those issues, but there's still a vulnerability there, no question about it.
Okay, vulnerability here in Hawaii?
I've been asked that question a lot. Most of our containerized freight on ships coming to Hawaii comes through California.
Okay.
Ports like Oakland or Riverside and places like that. So it's been pretty well screened. I've always characterized our situation here as being fairly vulnerable but low risk.
Okay. And what's the vulnerability that we have here? The low risk, but the vulnerability?
I would say in our ports, our real vulnerability would come from individuals or small groups being able to come into Hawaii off of fishing boats or something of that nature through a port that is oftentimes not as secure as it could be.
Okay, and what about the Canadian border? What's your assessment of
well, talking back on the mainland, the Canadian border is very porous. Maybe as much so as the Mexican border. There are numerous places across the Canadian-U.S. border where there are no checkpoints. I mean, basically a dirt road, or you can walk through the woods between the two countries.
Okay.
So, and then you have to look at the Canadian immigration policy, which has typically been very liberal. And then when we look at the Mexican border, that's pretty much been in the headlines lately with the issues of the illegal immigrant, the children coming in through the southern border and just being essentially wide open.
Okay, on terms of the Mexican border, let me talk with our production team, and because I want to get a video ready to roll here, and then this would be video number 2. Just get that ready to roll, and for the audience, you know, you've probably seen these videos or news broadcasts where you've got these hordes of young children or illegals rushing the border, crossing the Rio Grande, climbing fences. But maybe what you haven't seen is the death train. This is otherwise known as the Beast, and this is to illustrate how the illegals come up from South and Central America through Mexico to reach the jumping off places to cross into the United States. And so if we could roll video number 2. But just so you have the kind of the brief picture of what that looks like. And so let's turn now from the...
Let me just
Go ahead.
interject something real quickly, and maybe I don't want to get the cart before the horse here in what we're talking about, but as we talk about border security, and I would say primarily on the Mexican border, I just wanted to mention the issue of drug cartels and smuggling and tunnels as being another concern there on a porous border.
Let's pause for a moment here. If you just joined this program, or if you're having any difficulty connecting the dots, and I want to show you visual number 1, if we could, photograph number 1, production team, if you would put that up. This is a warning that was delivered, and Eric, maybe you can help us with this. This was an ISIS warning on their social media.
Yes, it was on their Twitter feed.
Okay. So our concern that we're talking about here on the anniversary of 9/11 is the possibility of ISIS or other radical terrorist groups penetrating into the homeland. And Eric, let's go to the topic of aviation security and pushing the borders back, if you will. And what's your assessment of where we sit vis-a-vis aviation security of radical jihadist folks coming into the U.S. Via aircraft?
Let me try and answer that systemically. I think that the DHS has done exactly the right thing to try and push the U.S. border back.
Explain what you mean by that.
Sure. In order for a airline passenger to get on an aircraft from outside the United States to the United States, their information is required by law and is transmitted to DHS. They vet that information, and they actually tell the airline, okay, you can print this person a boarding pass based on our vetting. So it's different than most other countries in the world that require the air carrier to just transmit data before the aircraft arrives in the United States,
Okay.
Or in their country, excuse me. That's the system we used to have. With the advent of the DHS, they've created this system that requires a clearance before the passenger even is allowed to get a boarding pass. So systemically, that's an extremely strong, and there is really no system in the world that compares to that. It's an extremely strong prevention.
So that means, just so I'm clear on this, that if I'm in an airport in London,
Yes.
or Narita, and I'm flying into the United States, that I come up to the ticket counter, and they take my passport at that moment in time. I don't have a boarding pass, and effectively the data is transmitted from London or Narita to the U.S., approved by somebody, and a yay or a nay transmitted back, and then the boarding pass is printed. That's what you're saying?
Yes, that's correct. In fact, to one small correction, at the time of ticketing, they require your name, gender, date of birth. So they use that information to vet passengers ahead of the departure day.
Okay, and that's just what you mean by effectively pushing the geographic border way out.
Correct, and they're extremely successful with that. It's a very, very good program.
Okay.
I don't want to say that the program is not great and effective, and I agree with you. It's the best that we've got, but I'd only point out that it's only as good as the intel that we have.
Yeah, that's...
And all 19 of the people that were involved in 9/11 were all here legally, and that program was not in place
Correct.
at that time, clearly. But the big question is, had it been, would it have caught these guys?
Sure. What it does, though, is allow DHS, I believe, to focus their efforts on people that they may think have been trying to cheat the system or using false IDs.
Right.
It allows a different level of vetting where you can you can segment what you're targeting and do a better vetting job and use your resources in one area versus the whole entire population. And you're also able to do it in advance of departure, and you can do it before that people come off the airplane and go through an immigration line.
Right.
You're able to flag people or stop someone before they ever get on board the aircraft, and those are the real tools that are available
And
to
at the
us.
risk of being politically incorrect, we're able to profile those people and use a profile, basically.
It's
It's some of the standard stuff, like
Sure.
buying a one-way ticket with cash, and just a whole range of things that could potentially raise a red flag.
What I would say is that, well, I'm certainly not disagreeing with that, but what I would say is that it's data-driven. It's a different type of profiling than the layperson may imagine of profiling, where they're in a booth with someone
Right.
that has a gun and they're asking you questions and looking through your things, right? That's a totally different level of profiling.
Yeah.
And that does exist, but not in the United States. What they're doing is vetting based on the information they have in Intel databases with the data that you've provided.
All right, so Eric, is this whole system of the geographic push out of the U.S. borders, so that the person is cleared in advance, is there a back door to this system? I mean, is it? I understand that the caveat is it all depends on the quality of the intel. All right, but as we look at the globe as a whole, is that a uniform procedure that's in place around the world now?
It's around the world for all flights departing any foreign location to the United States. Other governments have not yet adopted a system at this level that requires a clearance in advance of travel. I do believe that as we progress, we're going to see additional governments seeing the value of this and begin to require it, especially, the EU, I think, is progressing towards a system that will look something like this. It will be different because they don't have a TSA that has a central defense keeping body for the whole EU. It's all these independent countries with border agreements. So it's a very different animal, therefore it's going to require a different solution. But I believe that's exactly what they're primarily focused on addressing.
And the EU has basically within the EU an open border system for
Correct.
movement with that, which poses some interesting security risks, which when we get into the topic of ISIS and passports held by European nationals as well as Americans after the break, it changes the security picture a bit.
Of course.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching ThinkTech Global, and we're here talking about ISIS and U.S. border security on 9/11. Our guests are Charlie Goodwin, a former special agent in charge of the FBI here in the Pacific, and Mr. Eric Kaler, an aviation security expert. And we'll be back right after this break.
Hi, I'm Donna Blanchard. I'm the host of Center Stage here on the ThinkTech Digital Series. The show is every Wednesday from 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock, and I want you to watch this show because I think that when we talk with artists on the show about what they do, how they do it, and most importantly, why they do it, I believe that it resonates within each of us and we find something inside of ourselves that brings us closer to all of humanity. That's what arts are there to do, and that's what I'm here to do on this show. That's Center Stage. It's on every Wednesday from 2 to 3 o'clock. I hope to see you there.
We're back. This is ThinkTech Global, and we're talking about ISIS and U.S. border security here on the 13th anniversary of 9/11. And our special guests in the audience, in case you just joined us, our special guests here in the studio, Charlie Goodwin and Eric Kaler. Charlie is a former special agent in charge of the FBI here in Hawaii, and Eric is an aviation security expert. Well, let's talk about the situation with ISIS now. We've got some number, and one of you helped me with this, of European nationals carrying European passports that have left Europe and are now in the Middle East fighting for ISIS. Any of you have a feel for what that number is like?
Intel reports indicate from private sources that the numbers of European passports in Iraq and Syria alone are in the many thousands.
Okay, so we have thousands of Europeans fighting for ISIS right now that we know about. What about Americans? We've got Americans that have been killed, a couple of Americans killed fighting for ISIS recently. Any feel for what the number of Americans that are in the Middle East fighting for ISIS are?
There's no confirmed number, but all the reading that I've done indicates that it's somewhere around 100 plus.
Okay, so that the concern amongst everybody looking at this issue, I think, is that these people who have either European or American passports, they pose a different threat to U.S. border security when they get tired of fighting and want to return to the U.S.
Or to their countries in Europe.
Countries in Europe. So let's take the European situation first. Charlie, how do you see that playing out?
Well, they clearly have, in a lot of those countries, very large Muslim populations, and they've had a lot of immigration from those countries. So it's really not surprising, given the ability of those people to move back and forth, that you'd have a situation like this develop. I think the big concern is those people coming back, bringing trade craft with them, bringing knowledge of how to produce explosives and tactics, the use of tactics to disrupt the societies there. So I think it's a big problem, and it's clearly one the UK is looking at very seriously right now. And I think here in the US we have to look at it seriously as well. We've got, as Eric said, from all indications, at least 100. These people from UK, from European countries can move or come to the US on those legitimate passports pretty easily. So it's going to be a concern for us as well.
Eric, is there a firewall that exists to protect the United States against, let's say, a holder of a French passport who's been involved fighting for ISIS in Iraq, now back in Paris, and is about ready to board an Air France flight to come to the United States, and under the current system, that's a free and easy thing to do, right?
That's the big question. You know, in the last segment, Charlie mentioned that it depended on the intel. And this is exactly where the intel piece comes into play. And it's not just the United States intelligence services, it's also Europe's Interpol, who has vastly different experience and different capabilities than our own. And they have incredible working relationships where they're able to share data and work together and try and, because the threat is the same. Both countries realize that the threat is the same. And so they're able to work together. The real question for the public is, okay, if we know that there's thousands there and receiving information in tradecraft and getting experience in conducting these types of attacks that we are concerned about in the homeland, and there's thousands of them that have European passports and hundreds that have US, do we know enough about who they are? Will our systems work to prevent them to return? And what are the legalities around preventing a US citizen from returning? And how do you handle that situation on the airplane or at the border? As an operator of an airline, I don't want them dealing with that at the border. I want them dealing with that before this person gets on the airplane. So
right.
that in another country, no less, it just becomes extremely complex.
Well, and Charlie was talking about the British being very concerned in the UK about this situation, and I think that there is an open proposal made by the Cameron government. I don't think it's in place, but the concept is, if you go and fight for ISIS and you're a UK citizen, we're going to strip you of your passport. And so that's one solution. And I don't, and I know that there are a few members of Congress, both in the Senate and House, this week are proposing legislation in the United States that would do the same for American citizens. But as far as I know, the legality is a point well taken that you've made, Eric, is that we don't have I don't think the legal ability to strip someone of their citizenship with the snap of a finger.
I did a little bit of research on that.
I mean, am I wrong?
No, I think you're right on. For citizens who have been naturalized U.S. citizens.
Okay.
So if they've come here from another country and they've been naturalized here, there probably is a mechanism by which that citizenship could be revoked. But for somebody living here, born here, as you will, a natural U.S. citizen, not naturalized, but born in the U.S.
But you're talking about a legal process that would only take place once the individual is back in the United States.
Right,
it's not something that's going to happen
so
at the ticket counter in Paris.
Exactly.
Right?
But the other thing that potentially could be done and could be done now, and we see it with John Snowden, is Eric Snowden. We can basically take their passport away and their ability to travel. So if they're sitting, for instance, in the UK, and they are known to be having been fighting for ISIS in the Middle East, in Iraq or Afghanistan, then their passport could be revoked, and they would find themselves without a country for the time being, anyway.
Eric, what's your view on this?
I actually have a question for Charlie on that. My understanding is that requires a court case, doesn't it? A judge has to make a decision to revoke the passport, or is it only the State Department?
Well, I don't know. There again, I don't know if the State Department can unilaterally revoke a passport. They control them. That's a question I don't know the answer to. It may require a court hearing and an immigration law judge to do that, but it's a good question.
What I can add to the conversation is that there have been stops for people that are known to have been activated or motivated to join the fight. Have been stops at the borders. There's been stops in U.S. airports of people.
This is inbound or outbound?
Outbound.
Outbound.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, just recently in Colorado, right? A 19-year-old.
I read about Newark.
Yeah,
but I'm sure there's several.
There was one in Colorado, I think, just last week. But I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No problem. And it's not just the U.S. where that's happening. Europe is starting to get as active as they possibly can because they concur that this is the threat. And Australia is also very active in this. And one of the things that occurs to me is that stopping in Australia, the dialogue, the national dialogue and the media coverage over this threat of persons with a clean passport leaving Australia to go join the fight out of their own compassion for the cause, or whatever it is, and then come back is seen as such a threat that it's part of the national dialogue today. And there are stops at the border before they leave the country and detainments that occur regularly. And although we are starting to see the effects of that in the United States, I can't say that it's reached the dialogue in the United States at the same level. I don't know that there's an awareness.
Well, I think you're right.
In the United States, and that this is the threat, and how do you go about addressing this in our own communities and in our own dialogues, and preventing people from, what is it that causes people to suddenly say, I'm tired of living in a Midwestern city, just to not pick on anybody, and say, I've decided that I'm going to go join the fight in ISIS and I'm a believer. To me, that's a very big step that takes, it doesn't happen overnight, and there should be signs and there should be opportunities to engage. Very similar to our school shootings, and the crisis that we see in the United States, and how we're trying to address that problem within our communities.
And coming back to the Australian point that you raised, Eric, what you're saying is that there's a vigorous national dialogue, and Australia is working actively at the containment or detainment at the border, so that they're working actively on the outbound terrorist. Is Australia doing anything about stripping the individual of a passport or ability to travel once they've left the country? Let's say an Australian national is fighting for ISIS in Iraq, coming back inbound.
I'm really not an expert in that area, but from my own casual reading, what I understand is they're having the same struggles we are, is how do we address the legality of that, and how do we make sure that our laws support what we think needs to be done to address this threat, because it is a relatively new threat.
Okay. I'd also just point out that in the U.S. Code, there's a wide variety of charges, that are federal crimes that can be brought against U.S. citizens who engage in activities that are contrary to the best interests of the U.S. government.
Thankfully.
Yeah,
I'm glad they're there.
Yeah.
Well, let's do this. Let's take a short break, and when we come back, we'll continue with the discussion with Charlie Goodwin and Eric Kaler on the topic of ISIS and U.S. border security here on the 13th anniversary of 9/11. We'll see you on the other side of the break.
Hello, I'm Martin Despang, and I'm the host together with the one and only Ali Amashta, and our show is called Urban Transcendence. And Urban Transcendence is about identifying where we have a unique situation of a vibrant city in one of the most beautiful natural environments. So how these two can coincide, sometimes conflict, how they could find reciprocity in the 21st century is what we're excited about. And we're planning on bringing in a diverse body of guests, both from the arts and the science and the established and the wise and the emerging generation. So hope you will join us. We'll always be on Thursdays from 1 to 2 p.m. Thank you.
Welcome back. I'm David Day. You're watching ThinkTech Global, and our topic for conversation this evening is ISIS and U.S. border security here on the anniversary of 9/11. And our special guests in the studio with us, Mr. Charlie Goodwin, former special agent in charge of the FBI here in the Pacific. I know it was Hawaii, but I'm expanding your jurisdiction.
Yeah, well, actually, it covered all of the state of Hawaii, Guam, Saipan, Commonwealth of the Northern Marianas, American Samoa, and actually with respect to security and national security, we also had compacts with the other states out there, Palau, and
the big chunk of real estate.
Big, about 10 million square miles or something like that.
And we also have Mr. Eric Kaler in the studio with us, a nationally known aviation security expert. And Eric, again, thank you for joining us for the show.
Sure, my pleasure.
And we've been talking about the difficulties or the need for a national discussion on what do we do with Americans who have gone to join the fight for ISIS. They want to come back. Do we strip them of their passports? And Eric has made a very valuable point that we need to begin to have a national discussion on this. And I think that there are going to be some pieces of legislation being proposed this week in Congress to deal with this. But one of the things that we haven't really talked about, we've used the term ISIS, and we haven't really talked about the complexity of this whole radical jihadist nightmare that exists in the world. And let me talk to our production team. Would you put up, if we could, visual number 8, if we could, and maybe Eric, you can give us the broad brush. What are we looking at here? All these circles that make me dizzy here.
Sure, a little bit hard to see without for the lay person, but this is available on the internet. It's something that I found just doing a regular search, and what it indicates, the question is ISIS, and we are currently talking about going after them in terms of attacks, bombing campaigns. We're also talking about arming people in that region. And the question is, who are we arming? And when we're part of the previous dialogue to yesterday's announcements were that we were arming vetted Syrian rebels. So to me, the real question is, what does that mean, and how complex a prospect is that? And I think this diagram serves to sort of illustrate that. So you see below the black line, the largest circle is for ISIS. And the other circles are Al-Qaeda, and they're largely in competition with each other, which is the number one, an important factor to the United States, that they're in competition. It's important also to realize ISIS' mission. They are trying to build a nation state. Their primary enemies are the government of Iraq and the government of Syria. One of the complications is that the United States is also adversarial with the government of Syria. So when you talk about who's left, who are you arming, look at the other circles that are represented there and how difficult it is to ascertain whose alliances with who and the individuals that are involved here and what groups they can move to or between and what are the motivations behind that. And once we arm them, how do we ensure that that doesn't change? As we've seen so many times already.
You bet.
And it just becomes a very complicated prospect.
Let's go back to this diagram for one moment. And Eric, let's go full screen if we could on this. This diagram, ladies and gentlemen, has to do with jihadi fractures. And as I understand it, Eric, this is really just the breakout in rough format of the Sunni side of the jihadist elements. It does not lay out, I don't believe, the Hezbollah Hamas side of the equation that goes back into the Muslim Brotherhood. Maybe I'm missing something here, but am I correct?
No, it certainly does not answer the whole picture. It answers, the part of what does ISIS's network look like today, not necessarily who all their enemies are. It's about where their alliances lie.
Okay, let's put up visual number 9, and just as kind of as a, this is kind of the point that you're making, Eric, here, I think, is the United States is in bed with some group that maybe not tied in to the group that they really think they're tied in with. Am I right?
Yeah, well, it looks like to me some of those reins are financial, some of those reins are political, some of those reins are known, some of them are not known.
All right, let's go to another...
A lot of shifting sand there.
Yeah, the shifting sand.
Yeah.
Let's take a look at production team. Let's take a look and go back and forth between visuals 6 and 7 a few times, and this is the issue that some of you are thinking about, and this is the stolen Libyan airliners, visuals 6 and 7. And Eric, what can you tell us about this situation? Have we really got 11 missing airliners that are potential missiles to attack the United States?
What I'll say is that
This is, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, this is from the captured air base at Tripoli.
Yeah, so there's public reporting that's pretty current that says that there's these 11 airplanes are missing, and can they be used against the United States? The reporting source that I'll quote for this discussion is from Snopes. Snopes debunks this idea. They've said that some of the leaseholders, once the airline shut down, went and retrieved their aircraft and brought them to a safe location, and the others were damaged as the pictures that you have. And so Snopes indicates that there are not 11 missing airplanes that are out there in the world and are a threat to the United States, and those are flames that have been fanned and in the media, and it's something that the reports that I've read, both the little information that has been discussed on this subject and the lack of dialogue in many areas, indicates to me that Snopes is very likely correct, that this is not a risk that the U.S. public should be wasting their time being concerned with.
All right, a little bit different topic, and kind of over to you, Charlie. Drug cartels, this is kind of your area of expertise. Drug cartels and terrorist organizations like Hezbollah, like ISIS, potential for cooperation?
I think so. You know, if you look down at the Mexican border, Juarez, Central and South America, there's been consistent indications in Central and South America that Hezbollah has interacted with some of those governments and some of those drug traffickers down there. There isn't any indication right now, per se, that I'm aware of that indicates a wholesale effort on their part to get into the United States through Mexico to attack. I know there's been discussion along those lines. And the cartels are very sophisticated in their tunneling and things of that nature. So, and I think Tom Clancy wrote about it, you know, in a novel too. It's a good way to give them some other ideas. But I think the potential is certainly there for that type of cooperation.
Eric?
But I'm not sure, on the other hand, I'm not sure it's in the cartel's best interests to attack America. I mean, we have our differences.
Well, they're really a business organization,
this is where
right?
they make their money.
Right.
Selling drugs in the United States. So do they really want to destroy that?
Yeah, that makes sense. Eric, over to you on another point. You made the point, I think, very effectively that it's, you know, when push comes to shove with the aviation security, it comes back on the intel side. How good is the intel? And what's your view on this whole issue of you know, the NSA? You know, they're collecting all this data, all this information, and how do you see that as the impacting the ability of our country to disrupt or block an ISIS terror attack on the U.S.?
It's a very complicated subject. What I would say is that it's an extremely difficult mission, and what they are focused on for this conversation is not inside the United States, it's outside the United States, and that's what I'll speak to. Using their partnerships to the best of their ability, we think that they do a very good job. The risk, of course, is that we only have to be misaligned once. You know, for a terrorist attack to happen, it's not sort of a single barrier that has to be breached. There's multiple layers within the security system of the United States, of course, and also within aviation security. And so is an individual with a clean passport able to line up the holes in the Swiss cheese and get all the way through? That's the real question.
What's a clean passport for the audience, so they know?
A clean passport is someone who we think, as pertaining to the previous discussion, may be a U.S. citizen or someone of European citizenship that goes and gets trained and partakes in the fight and now wants to return. And when they're returning, the danger to Homeland Security in the United States is from someone either with a U.S. passport or any of the European passports, because they don't require a visa to enter the United States. to be able to come into the United States and access and potentially carry out the type of attack that is going on out there domestically.
I have to also point out that we here in the United States already, as we've seen people trying to go join the fight, we do have converts here in the United States. A lot of them come out of the prison populations. Others are just misguided, whatever the case may be. But for whatever reason, they're already here, and
They don't have
there's
to.
a multitude of information available on the internet to them, and ISIS now actively trying to recruit people in a lot of countries.
So that's the concept of a sleeper cell, is it?
Well, I
sort
don't even know if, I don't think you'd really call it a sleeper cell. I think it would be just somebody that's converted to this radical notion of Islam and identifying with ISIS for whatever reason. Eric mentioned, school shooters and things like that. Those are definitely people who could be attracted to something like this, and they're already here in the U.S.
You know, we've had this conversation between the three of us here on the U.S. border security here on the 13th anniversary of 9/11, and we're having this discussion because there is a concern on the part of the public out there, and I want to play a video for the two of you, kind of get your reaction to this. And this is a very prescient observation made in 2007 by President George Bush. And this is something, ladies and gentlemen, that you will not see readily in the media. And what we've done is, to be fair, so what you're going to see is a video of some ISIS tanks. They're on their way to the battle to capture the Syrian base at Tabga. And these are captured American and Russian tanks. And of course, the video was shot recently, and we've added the audio, the very prescient statement by President George W. Bush made in 2007 to this video. And if we could roll that video number 3, production team, why that'd be great.
I know some in Washington would like us to start leaving Iraq now. Begin withdrawing before our commanders tell us we're ready would be dangerous for Iraq, for the region, and for the United States. It would mean surrendering the future of Iraq to Al-Qaeda. It would mean that we'd be risking mass killings on a horrific scale. It would mean we allow the terrorists to establish a safe haven in Iraq to replace the one they lost in Afghanistan. It would mean increasing the probability that American troops would have to return at some later date to confront an enemy that is even more dangerous.
Meaning we might have to face the same enemy again, we might have to go back. Let's not cut and run early, basically. That's what President Bush was saying. And I just, very, very prescient observation, listing down point by point exactly what could happen if we pulled out of Iraq and Afghanistan early, prematurely. That's precisely what happened. Now we're back into the same or a similar boat. I know, either one of you have any reaction or comments on this? If you don't, it's fine, but if you do.
I think, from my part, I think it was completely predictable. You leave a vacuum, somebody's going to fill it. And when we left, and we didn't leave any assets there, and we basically, in Iraq, left before they were totally ready to assume the responsibility for their security, without a stable government that was inclusive in place. It's natural. Somebody's going to fill that void, and unfortunately, in this case, it's people that were even more radical than those that were there before.
Eric, last word on this program. Over to you.
My impression, I think, if I may, one quick question for the audience. I don't know that we said what date that speech was made by George.
2007.
2007. I think we're very much looking at the same picture today, if you look forward, as he was. From 2007 to 2014. It's expanding exponentially. And that one slide that we showed that showed difficulties and all the different alignments, I think speaks exactly to how complex an issue it really is.
We've got I think, ladies and gentlemen, some difficult years ahead of us, and I want to thank you, Eric, and you, Charlie, for helping to contribute to this discussion on this very critical topic, ISIS and U.S. border security, here on the anniversary, the 13th anniversary of 9/11. We hope you found this discussion to be valuable. I'll see you next week. I'm David Day for ThinkTech Global. Have a safe drive home.